actually provide leadership on issues of consequence to the people of Massachusetts. And this is one where he needs to be there for us. And he's not. He hasn't been. And if I'm your governor, you can count on the fact that I would sign legislation like this. I would work with a sense of urgency to do everything we can in this state to reduce gun violence and protect people in Massachusetts.
So I would sign the extreme risk protective order. I just want to point out that the issue of gun violence is complicated, and people use it for political benefit, as I believe Mr. Levy is doing, to conjoin many different issues. So there are 38,000 people in the country who die of gun violence, and 14,000 of those die in homicides, but 22,000, almost 60%, die in suicides. So gun violence is about suicide. Gun violence is also about poverty and racism. Gun violence is about a lot of other things, as horrific as school shootings are, and we need to address those. It's part of a deeper pattern of gun violence across the entire country. So the extreme risk protective order is designed to protect people from hurting themselves or who may be at risk of hurting others. And when you have no law that allows the police or anyone else or a family who knows that there is a serious problem, who can tell that something is coming, to step in and revoke that person's license or ability to own a handgun for a temporary period. That to me is the essence of common sense when you're dealing with a public health crisis, when you're dealing with a fundamental crisis of economic justice, and when you understand that there are so many guns now loose in the hands of so many people who themselves are unstable. I mean, I don't know what Mr. Lively is about to say next. I mean, if he wants to arm everybody, first of all, I'm curious if he's carrying a gun right now in order to protect us. Secondly, what age? Maybe we should arm school children as well. Because, you know, the teacher may be busy, so we might want to have 11-year-olds having guns, or 12-year-olds, or 14-year-olds. I don't know what the limit is. Maybe we should all pick up guns when we walk into the public library in case there's anybody else here with a gun. This is insanity. So we need the extreme protective order to protect people who are a danger to themselves and to others.
Response?
Well, yes. There is a line between reason and unreason, and passing out guns as you enter the building is probably unreasonable. But to the other extreme, taking away all the guns, thinking that's going to solve the problem, is also unreasonable.
I didn't say all.
Well, it's but that's sort of the mentality. The idea is that the sort of premise of the arguments being made here is that guns are bad themselves. Right? It's not the guns that are bad. I mean, this slogan goes back a long time. Guns don't kill people. People kill people. And if they don't have guns, then they're going to use something else. So what you want to have, it's sort of like the issue with air marshals in flights, right? The fact that there are some people on almost all flights now that are carrying guns makes everyone safer, right? They're professionals that are doing it. And as would the teachers and the staff be, if they were allowed to carry guns in the schools, they would be professionals.
Okay, thank you. There are more than 200 deaths by gunshot in Massachusetts per year. 2 questions. How can we find out if these are due to local or out-of-state guns? And then what measures can be taken to prevent the flow of guns from other states to Massachusetts?
So anything we can do in this area is going to be imperfect, right? I mean, we should increase enforcement of gun trafficking from other states with weaker gun laws. We should increase communication with other states so that we can track and work with them collaboratively to be tracking guns that we find here and do everything we can to work collaboratively with them to reduce the number of guns illegally in this state. But the only way we're actually going to address this problem is through a national federal solution. And we need strong federal gun laws. Massachusetts strong gun laws are only going to go so far because of the very issue that you raised in this question. The NRA has a stranglehold on the federal government. preventing it from taking a lot of the reasonable steps that we've taken right here in Massachusetts, and we need to advocate for that to change. We've got a governor right now who, once again, has provided no leadership on this issue, nowhere to be found. I'll say it again, kind of like at this forum. And, the Boston Globe wrote an editorial, I believe, encouraging our governor to take a leadership role on this issue nationally. He has said he thinks that the federal government should adopt the strong gun laws like we have here in Massachusetts. Well, then do something about it. Take your leadership position here. Take all your political capital here. And become a leader on this issue to make people across this country safer. If you really believe that, do something about it. And I want you to know that if I'm your governor, on issues of consequence like this, I will provide leadership. I will advocate for our interests and our values around this country on important issues like gun violence and others.
Time.
Is that to me? Well, one of the most shocking things about this is that the opponents of gun control, the people who want to promote the maximum amount of guns, oppose any research, any public health research, any research to find out exactly how these guns are being used or what the origins of gun violence might be. It goes back to the so-called Dickey Amendment, which in 1996 was tucked into a budget bill which banned the Center for Disease Control from even looking at the question. So, I mean, it's interesting because I think they're terrified of what we would find out, or they would discover that there were pathways that we would choose which would lower the number of guns and therefore violence, which is the effect around the world. So, as governor, one of the things I want to do is ensure we can have the data to get answers to questions like this. And so one of the first things I would do is call together an interagency task force from the Department of Public Health, Department of Mental Health, and ask us to do the research that's being barred by the federal government. That's number one. Number two, we have some of the greatest public health schools in the world right here in Massachusetts. And I would pull together the deans of those schools and the presidents of those universities and say, here is an opportunity for you to lead, an opportunity for you to pour the sunlight of truth onto this question and help us move forward. And then having done those two things, in addition, I would provide the leadership as a fundamental act of what it is to be a governor, is to help people put a spotlight on these failures, these fundamental failures, and, as I said before, all the different pieces, poverty, addiction, all the other elements that lead us to have a system driven by violence and driven by guns.
That actually sounds like almost a conservative solution. I applaud you. I think that what we really should be doing is doing the research and finding out exactly what it is that made these 200 people commit the gun violent acts that they did, the deaths. Why did those people commit those kind of crimes when all the rest of the gun owners in the state didn't? Right? How many people in Massachusetts are actually gun owners? I'd say, I don't know, I'd say probably somewhere between 500,000 and 2 million people in the state of Massachusetts. And out of that group of people, what was different about these 200 that they engaged in some type of violence that ended in someone's death? That's where the research should be at. That's what an intelligent society would do. I see people sort of laughing about the idea, but isn't that the first thing you would do? You know, why did this person who killed this other person, why did they do that and all the neighbors around them that have guns didn't do that? Because if you can identify the triggers for the people, what's making these people crazy enough to do that, then you can actually focus on those aspects of things. Because those people that are going to do those things, someone who is inclined to do violence against their neighbors, isn't going to stop because they don't have a gun. Over and over, it has to be repeated. These people will find some other way to hurt you if that's what they want to do. So if it's a panacea to think that you're somehow going to become safe by taking away some types of guns from the community. Because they're just going to come and bash you over the head with a hammer. They're going to use a handsaw. They're going to use whatever. there's an endless number of possibilities for how they could hurt you if they want to. Let's figure out why they're hurting people and stop the things that are making that happen.
Was that it?
Yeah.
Oh, then I actually have a follow-up.
Would you like a response?
I like it, yeah. So on a couple pieces here. So I'm glad to hear Mr. Lively opposes the action by President Trump to weaken gun laws and to make it easier for people with mental illness to own guns, and that you oppose the Dickey Amendment and would like to see the CDC have the opportunity to explore this. So I appreciate that you oppose the Republican Party's position. I also think people could kill us with grenades and with flamethrowers and with bazookas, and they could fly an Apache helicopter and fire a torpedo into this room. But those things are illegal. And so their ability to get a flamethrower or roll a couple grenades down has been limited. So they have to rely on guns. I think that if we restricted the number of guns, yes, they might turn to a knife, but the history is that people with knives have a lot of trouble killing a lot of people. So I think it's a logical and reasonable protection to lower the number of guns so that the people who do wish to commit violence, who should be getting mental health care, by the way, do not have the opportunity to use the most destructive weapons available.
Well, it's, they may not be able to get a flamethrower, but they can get a bottle and a rag and make a Molotov cocktail and do just as much damage with that. It's, this is, once again, this is not, it's not what they have in their hands. It's what they have in their heads.
Okay. Massachusetts has the lowest rate of gun deaths of any state. We also have some of the strongest gun laws. We used to have the strongest. After the ERPO bill, if that passes, if that's signed into law, what's the next step for Massachusetts to continue to lead in preventing gun violence?
Well, as I said, one of the proposals I've made is that we should ban the manufacture of assault weapons here in Massachusetts. The fact that the gun that was used in Parkland was made right here is extremely disturbing. And the federal government is doing nothing about this. Enough is enough. We need to do everything we can here. And you can't buy one here, you shouldn't be able to make one here. I don't want us contributing to this national problem because the federal government won't step up. I also have a whole set of proposals. I'd encourage you to go to my website and look at them to reduce gun violence. Everything from a number of proposals to stop gun violence before it starts, things like investing in summer job programs for at-risk youth, to reducing access to guns, things like closing a loophole that continues to exist in our law for background checks for private sellers, and addressing the impacts of gun violence. I'm a big supporter of criminal justice reform. There was great legislation just passed. I think this is a big part of how we reduce gun violence. For those who are involved in it, who end up in our criminal justice system, making sure we've got the programming in place so that they're successful when they get out and on a positive and productive path and don't recidivate and end up committing another crime and more gun violence. So those are some of the things I think we need to do. What we definitely don't want to do is move backwards and weaken Massachusetts gun laws like Charlie Baker is threatening to do. The fact that he committed to the CEO of a gun silencer manufacturing company that gave a bunch of money to the Republican Governors Association, that he would sign legislation to lift the ban on gun silencers here should worry all of us. We don't need to be moving backwards, we need to be moving forwards. And I wish Governor Baker were here to actually explain his position on that issue.
Who's next?
Well, there are a lot of things we can do. I mean, so first of all, one of the things we have to do is limit the sale of ammunition. We should limit the sale of ammunition online. I think we should restrict the amount of ammunition you can buy at any one time. In Israel, where people do have guns because they have a militia, very, very tightly controlled guns, and you're only allowed to buy 50 bullets at a time. And if you want to buy more, you have to turn in the 50 bullets that you have, or you have to demonstrate where you shot them. So there are a lot of other provisions we can make. We also need to treat this as a public health crisis. So if you look at places where gun violence has spiked, it's in lower income or communities of color which are been devastated by failure to advance the economy. I am running on a platform to turn the economy that's upside down right now and focus resources, energy, jobs, investment on the communities that need it most, that are not just in Boston but out across the state. So we need to address the underlying structural problems in this state, and there's a long way to go on this. And I believe that if we treat this as an epidemic, then we can involve sheriffs. I've met with several sheriffs who are working very hard to provide programming inside jail. Don't understand why we provide it, but we don't provide it before or after jail. There's many, many steps that are available to us, and you need a governor who understands the integrated nature of these problems and is willing to act across the board to address these challenges.
My wife and I actually founded an inner city mission in Springfield, Massachusetts. We bought the worst house in the worst neighborhood on purpose in order to show the power of redemptive living. We didn't want to come in from the suburbs. We were there right in the heart of the inner city. There was a shooting right on the corner the day we took possession of the house. There was a criminal squatter living in the basement of the house when I took possession of it. Then we opened an inner city mission church on State Street, right across from Springfield Technical Community College. We serve the most disadvantaged people in society, the bottom strata. And the very people that we're talking about here, the ones who have lost their family members because of these shootings, are my clients. And I live above that myself. Sometimes you can hear the violence going on outside. And yet the solution to the problem is not banning guns. Those people that the criminals get guns somehow, and they manage to use them. So the solution really is to stop the family breakdown that's going on. You want to understand what's the real problems of the inner city? It's the breakdown of family, it's the proliferation of drugs, and the legalization of marijuana is not helping at all, I can tell you that, especially with the teenagers. They now think that it's okay to be high all the time because it's been legalized for the adults for quote-unquote medical reasons. And who can learn when they've been smoking pot before they went to class? Anyway, these are the kinds of things that are really going on, and I know because I live there. And it's not a matter of what the guns that they have in their hands, it's what's going on in their head and why their lives are really so messed up. Poverty is a part of it, but the family breakdown is the biggest factor, as I believe it is at all of the shootings that are taking place. The breakdown of the family produces chaos in society. Oh, yes, it does.
Any responses?
Well, I just want to say, I'm also a person of faith, and I appreciate that you have been willing to locate yourself there. But what I don't understand is your hardness of heart. So I'll just say that my life of faith focuses on the call to feed the hungry and clothe the naked and visit those in prison. I'm assuming that given...
Do all those things.
Okay. But then when you look at other parts of your positions, and they simply don't connect with what I think we're called to do as agents of justice, agents of mercy in this world. And so, I would ask you to reconsider some of your positions in the light of the guidance that I think many of us share, which is that we should be doing justice in this world and not hammering people for the failures that you have decided are inexcusable.
How would you address the disproportionate effects of gun violence in communities of color? And what would be a solution that, as governor, you would try to implement? We'll start with Mr. Massey this time.
Well, I have been working and caring passionately